This is another article from the White Zulu. Yep, we're talking about Fiona Timms. And this is about elephants. And her headline here, and this is coming in two parts because it's a long story, so I'll give you half now and I'll give you half next week. It's called the Gusana Camp Diary, Elephant Antics. And Salo Camp, and she starts off on the 2nd of July 1997. So this is what, 23 years ago, how it used to be at the Okavongo swamps. At midday, while the camp was fairly quiet and the day was still and baking hot, 6 bull elephants materialized at the waterhole, a few meters from the dining area, which is a large raised platform with no walls, but a thatch roof overlooking a large waterhole. They were so quiet that as I was sitting there checking the menu plan and happened to glance in that direction, that I saw them. Four of them had even been in the water, judging from their wet feet and trunks. I called Fred, my fellow relief manager, and he ran to get his camera. As he was taking photos and I watched, the 6 5+ ton animals drifted off just as silently as they had arrived. It is amazing how such enormous animals can move so quietly and so fast. 5 minutes later, there was no trace of them, and no one would have believed us. That night during dinner, 2 hyena also came to drink from the waterhole, which is floodlit after dark. Diary note from the 7th of August, 8 p.m. Lunch and dinner went fine. The English family had left, so we were now 19 altogether, 16 guests and 3 white staff. During dinner, Fred disappeared, and when I asked where he was, Nikki, the young hostess, just said casually, "Oh, he's gone to chase Saddam out of the camp as he's back." Saddam is a huge lone bull elephant who frequently comes to browse off the trees in the camp, causing the enormous amount of damage by breaking branches off and knocking over big trees and destroying the buildings. There used to be a 12-bore shotgun in the office, which Fred would fire near him to scare him off, but the gun has gone back to Maun with the owners of Heartless Safaris. So Fred was shouting and throwing objects at the elephant, who ignored him and calmly carried on munching. We actually had an elephant night watchman called Oscar, a fat little Tswana River bushman, who speaks very little English, but some Afrikaans and Portuguese as well as Tswana. He is also attending Bible school at the Zionist Christian Church in his spare time. His sole duty is to keep elephants out of the camp at night. His method of doing so is to bang on an empty paraffin tin, his blick, with a stick, as well as hurl half bricks and stones while shouting at them, but not loudly enough to disturb our sleeping guests. What he actually does is drag some cushions into the guest loo near the outdoor bar, where he sleeps all night, after first having liberally sprayed himself with peaceful sleep, kept specifically for the guests, and polished off anything he can find in the bar that isn't locked away. The kitchen has to be kept locked as well, not for hyenas like at Tsara, my previous camp, but to stop Oscar from cleaning it out as well. Eventually, very late, and after escorting each guest back to their accommodation, we staff finally went to bed at 2 a.m. As I was drifting off, I felt my eardrums begin to flutter, and sat bolt upright in my bed. The last time I'd had that sensation was when I was in my last year at school and sitting at the teacher's table on the platform, supervising prep for a class of second formers. After the fluttering, my table had begun to vibrate, and finally the whole building was shaking and rocking slightly. It only went on for a couple of minutes, but the earthquake seemed to take forever. One of the girls put up her hand and said, "Your face has gone quite white." And she was right. They all appeared to be oblivious to this phenomenon, but it had shaken me to the core. Then I heard the sound of elephants munching right next to my ear, and realized that it was a subsonic communication between the elephants that I was feeling. I peeked cautiously out of the door of my hut, normally set aside for pilots staying overnight, into the dark, and saw an elephant browsing casually off the tree which grows against my hut. Then there was a resounding thud as a small rock hurled by Oscar at the elephant missed and connected the wall of my tiny rondavel, which shook under the impact. The elephant didn't even pause in his munching and simply reached out with his trunk just past my nose through the open door to yank another branch off. Then there was pandemonium. Fred had now joined in by grabbing some empty wine bottles from the bar, and with Nicky holding the torch so he could see where to aim. He said, "I wonder if the bastard would prefer a Chardonnay or a rose," as he hurled them at the elephant's backside, missed, and got a direct bit on my rather flimsy pilot's hut again. I shouted, "You're doing more damage than the elephants!" And so the night went on. The pattern was a bit like this. Elephants breaking branches, heavy thudding of feet running past, the clanging of the blick, being beaten with a stick by Oscar, then a yell and a thump as a half a brick hit my hut, then more running away this time as the elephant charges Oscar. Finally, in the distance, a few bars of a hymn like "Onward, Christian Soldiers," as Oscar sings to himself, to summons up the courage to regroup his rocks and start all over again. At first light, the next morning, Nicky and I go round the camp, picking up pieces of broken glass from the wine bottles. We don't want this sitatunga, a very rare marsh-dwelling antelope, very similar to the bushbuck, but which has hooves adapted to swampy terrain. They are elongated hooves with a wide splay and naked pad-like pastern, who graze the lush green lawns around the camp at night. We don't want them to cut themselves. I must end now. Have to chase some baboons out of the camp and then get to this letter into the mailbag and on to Alpha Golf Whiskey. Okavongo is a particularly beautiful camp set on the shores of a very large island in the wet season, but which becomes a peninsula when the waters recede enough for the old Bedford lorry to manage to trek our heavy supplies like diesel, maize meal for the staff, flour, sugar and tin goods overland. Now in August, the waters which flow down the highlands of Angola have risen almost to their summertime levels. A couple of years before, I'd come to work at Okavongo. They had a very special guest to stay. His Royal Highness of the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, had spent a few nights at the lodge, the Okavongo Delta being one of his favourite game viewing places. There is a brass plaque on the bar saying he had been there, giving the dates, and which Misasa, thatched guest hut on stilts, he had slept in. There's also a framed, handwritten letter from him personally to all the staff at Okavongo, saying how much he had enjoyed himself and thanking everybody for making it such a memorable and happy occasion. Fred, who had been enlisted as extra staff to supplement the 3 permanent people working there, explained that a whole bunch of security staff had arrived by helicopter the week before. They checked the place out with a fine tooth comb, making sure everything was safe for His Royal Highness, right down to the bottled water he had been drinking, the menu, which included tasting all the food which would be served up to him, and even combed the game viewing vehicles. Mikoros, wooden dugout canoes, our fleet of 3 little 4-seater Cessnas, and the 2 motorbikes to make sure they were safe and secure. Fred explained, it was really hard work during the week leading up to his arrival, but once His Royal Highness had flown in by a private helicopter and settled in, it all went very smoothly. He couldn't have been more charming, easy, and soaked up the atmosphere with great enthusiasm. I got the feeling that he would have liked to have stayed on much longer, as he was so relaxed here with no worries or intrusion, just viewing birds, animals and reptiles in these wonderful surroundings. The prince's visit happened to be at a particularly difficult time in his personal life, and it was while I was at Xuna, Ghana, 3 years later, that his ex-wife died in that tragic car accident, although we knew nothing about it for over a week. It was only when some of the guests were discussing the sad event at dinner one evening when Nicky heard them and asked what had happened to Princess Di. We were shocked to hear that she had already been buried. Friday, the 8th of August, 8:30 in the morning. Nicky has left to go and do a month's shift at the head office in Maun, and Kira has flown in to replace her. She is very pretty, young, a natural blonde and utterly delightful. During breakfast, 19 people, we hear a loud crash. All guests and staff ran to see that an elephant had pushed a big tree over onto Masasa number 6 and was calmly eating the branches which were now resting on the thatch roof. We also saw in the daylight that this is not Saddam, who has a broken tusk and a small hole through one ear from a hunter's bullet, but a new bull, even bigger, approximately 5.5 tons with huge tusks. We chased him off and he strolled away to vanish in the reeds and water. The owner of our 2 camps was flying in from Maun that morning, just for the day. So when he arrived, we took him to see the damage and asked for the 12-bore back. He said he'd fly a chainsaw up for us to cut away the huge branch still lying on Masasa 6. During dinner that same evening, just as a delicious hot spinach soup was put on the table, a steaming bowl in front of each guest, still 19 of them, there was another loud crash. We 3 grabbed torches. I now have one, a nice heavy and powerful 8-cell Maglite, having bought it at great expense in Maun, and ran out to find that the new elephant had picked up the tree lying on Masasa 6 with his trunk, dropped it onto the wall and breaking it. 2 visitors, Australians who are staying in Masasa 6, are quite anxious about how they are going to be safe during the night, as are we 3 staff. The other Australians who are travelling with them think it's a huge joke, and plenty of advice is given, but not so funny for us. As this is a mean elephant, he is totally unafraid of humans, has obviously been in camps before, and when we try and chase him by throwing rocks and half bricks at his backside, he charges us and we have to run for our lives. Also, the camp is full and there's nowhere to put the couple from 6 except the owner's private Masasa, and that is strictly forbidden. It's not locked and there's plenty of room, but we aren't allowed to put a foot in there except to clean it just before they come to stay. It's after 10 p.m. and everyone has gone to bed, even the nervous couple in number 6. The elephant comes back an hour later, and the 4 of us, Oscar, Fred, Kira and I, spend the whole night trying to prevent it from pulling at the tree lying on number 6's wall. I keep going out and getting my slippers all muddy, trying to help Oscar, as my torch is stronger than his, and he needs someone to shine it while he throws his rocks. He fills his blick up now and rattles stones in it before he hurls them, while pounding along at an ungainly run. We both occasionally have to run away and duck into my hut, which is like a little island in the middle of all the activity, and very well placed for cover, as this elephant is really dangerous and would kill one of us if he could. Also, nobody can sleep through the racket, and the hymn singing, even though we keep it down as much as possible, so as not to wake the guests. Saturday, the 9th of August. Chainsaw arrives, but we couldn't use it because all the remaining guests are having an afternoon snooze as they were kept up all night by our elephant chasing. Another group of Italians has arrived. These are 2 hunters and 1 slut. Both men, real lounge lizards, had obviously come to Africa to hunt big game. They had both arrogantly jumped off the boat, which ferries guests to and from the tiny grass airstrip, dressed to overkill in brand new khaki, real leather hunting boots, huge leather belts with enormous shiny brass buckles, which had big skinning knives built in. More knives in sheaves and leather brass bandoliers were slung over their shoulders. The girl had peroxidized, nearly white blonde hair, wore leopard print leggings and a skimpy off-the-shoulder sequin top. She carried all their heavy luggage the whole way to their mesasas, number 7 and 9, while the men strolled along empty-handed. The first thing the hunters complained about was that all their fusils, or guns, and ammunition, all brand new of course, had been left behind in Milan, as Air Italia would not allow them on the plane. So Kira had to sit on the two-way radio to our head office in Milan all afternoon trying to arrange for the firearms to be flown out. No airline is keen to have any kind of ammunition sent unaccompanied, so they refused. We were most relieved, as so far every bird, animal or reptile these two slime balls had seen, or which were pointed out to them, they had asked which would be the best way to kill it. We and the other guests hated them with a passion, and it was obvious that the girl had been brought along, as she slept in both their rooms. I hadn't been able to resist asking the Tswana room staff whether she had, and they confirmed it by saying she was in the 2 different beds when they took them their early morning coffee trays. There are 2 Japanese guests staying, but separately. Mrs. Suzuki, the nearest I can get to her real name, is a miniature, little old grey-haired lady, all smiles and bows. She gives yen coins to all the guides and the room staff, who are thrilled because the coins are new and shiny and have holes through them so they can make necklaces. They're also worth plenty of Botswana pula on the current exchange rate. She has a Polaroid camera and generously takes photos of everybody, including all the staff, and then gives us the pictures to keep. Mrs. Suzuki points to the cauliflower cheese at dinner and then to her head and says, "Hair used to be Riki Blokori, now Riki cauliflower." And she is quite right. It's short and white and curly. It was oxtail stew for dinner, and I tried to explain the part of ox to her in sign language. Eventually she said, "Ah, tail soup. So it's tail soup from now on. Then at lunch on." So there we go, guys. That's part 1 of the elephant stories from the Okavongo Delta, from the White Zulu, Fiona Timms. Please remember to subscribe to be kept informed and ring the bell for the updates. Please like this video, please share this video, and above all, please stay safe. Bye for now.